In studio with us, Ron Rutland, who's just completed 2,011 kilometers across Mongolia for the longest hole in golf. I suppose the most obvious question to ask you, Ron, is why?
I think with all these sort of things, there's a million reasons not to do it. But I reconnected with an old rugby friend of mine last year in Kenya. He was playing for Hong Kong rugby team, and Hong Kong were touring Kenya, and I was helping them with a bit of liaison stuff. And I gave a talk to the team about most of the guys had never been to Africa, and I gave a talk to the team about my cycling trip through Africa a few years before. And Adam said, "You know what, Ron? I really want to go and live a big adventure, and I'm a keen golfer." And he said, "I'd love to go back to Ireland and play golf around Ireland." So I quite quickly said, "Well, Ireland's a fantastic place, but if you want to go play golf across the country, I went to Mongolia 10 years ago, and my goodness, there's a place to go and play golf, the world's biggest fairway." So he dreamt up the idea of him playing golf across Mongolia. He was at a bit of a crossroads in his life. His rugby career was coming to an end. And from there, over a few cups of coffee, the idea was dreamed up.
I love that coffee, eh?
That's why good coffee.
See,
strong Kenyan coffee.
Some of the greatest ideas in this show come out of cups of coffee. 27 months alone and unsupported on your continuous journey through every country in Africa by bicycle.
Yeah, so that was a trip that obviously completely changed my life. I'd spent so much of my life reading books about adventure and reading all these great stories about people doing really cool things. But until that point, it had always been things that other people did, people that were richer or stronger or fitter. And then you start meeting some of these people, and I started realizing sort of a middle-aged confidence boost, I guess, that the only difference between these people and myself is they made a decision to do it. And I'd always find excuses not to do it. And one day I took the map of Africa, and I said, I'm going to go and spend 6 months cycling from Cape to Cairo. It's a pretty, well-documented route, and people do it all the time in overland vehicles and motorbikes, and fairly frequently on bicycles. And as I took the map of Africa, I started looking at all these countries north of Malawi that I'd never been to. They were kind of off the traditional Cape to Cairo route. So I thought, let me do a little zigzag through Uganda and Rwanda. And then one day, just a daydreaming, I took this black marker pen and drew a line that linked every single country on mainland Africa, more just as an idea than anything else. But as soon as I drew that line on the map, I thought, this is now what I want to be doing. So sort of my 6 month sabbatical became a sort of 2.5 year, pretty audacious expedition. I'd never done anything like that in my life. I'd probably spent 4 or 5 nights of my life in a tent until that point. A lot of people told me it was impossible. No one's
Especially unsupported.
Yeah, just me and my bicycle. No one had ever attempted a journey through every country on mainland Africa in one journey in any sort of vehicle. So it was a first on many levels.
You must have the strongest calf muscles ever now.
I'm going to ask, do you carry a spare tire?
You were known as Fat Kid on a Bike before you departed.
No, it was, everything I sold, and to be part of my sort of, I guess, my mental and, financial commitment to it is I sold absolutely everything in the world I owned. And it was, as I say, partly to finance it, but also partly for me to sort of, not to give myself an out. So when things got tough, knowing that I was completely committed to this journey and that there was nothing to come back to was sort of part of my motivation for doing it. So everything I owned was on the bicycle, which for a bicycle made it pretty heavy. You got all your... But, a lot of people go on holiday with more stuff than I had on, a weekend away. My bike fully loaded, probably weighed about 40 kilos. Which for a bicycle is super heavy, but for your last possessions it's not much. And it's your sleeping bags and tents and a couple of spare parts and first aid kits. And I was about 20 kilograms overweight as well. I'd broken my wrist a few months before I left. So the first time I ever sat on the bicycle that I was going to spend the next 2.5 years of my life on was the day I left from Cape Town Stadium.
No, stop it.
Yeah, literally. So, and the only day of the whole trip I planned was day one, where I had some mates join me. We were going to cycle from Cape Town Stadium to Franschhoek. And the cyclists out there will know that's it's a relatively straightforward route if you're on a normal bicycle and you're semi-fit. But my condition on that bicycle, we told everyone meet us at for lunch at Franschhoek at 1 o'clock. I think about 4 o'clock we arrived. People were literally my friends were pushing me up Hell's Hoogte, and I'm sure they were looking behind me going, "Oh."
Great friends.
Yeah, if Ron can't even get to Franschhoek, how the hell is he ever going to get to London?
It is the longest cycle I've ever heard of to try and get to watch a World Cup rugby match, which is where we met up in Bristol.
In Brighton.
In Brighton, sorry.
Correct, yeah.
Where Japan annihilated the Springboks.
Well, I'll try and put a positive spin on most things, and let's just say it was a historic end to a historic journey.
We're going to continue our conversation with Ron Rutland. Find out more about his trip across Mongolia for the longest hole in golf. As you can hear, the man is determined. He's not scared of a challenge. And hopefully he'll inspire you to greatness in your life. A message through on the WhatsApp line for Ron says, please ask Ron which African countries were the safest to cycle through and which were the least.
I think it probably, I mean, related to cycling itself, the only country, I ended up cycling through 75 countries. The only one I'll never ever go back to on a bicycle is Nigeria. I mean, every single day I thought, I mean, it's 150, 160 million people, infrastructure's a bit of a mess, absolutely no rules on the road, and it's hair-raising every single day. I thought this was it. And, I mean, other countries, when you're cycling through the desert and the jungles, the biggest challenge is, the odd pothole or sand dune and things like that. But I think what surprised a lot of people, unfortunately, Africa gets a bit of a bad rap, even here in South Africa. The only time it's ever in the news is when there's famine or war or corruption or whatever. But the Africa that I experienced was incredible. I had no issues with people. So from a human safety point of view, it was, dare I say, plain sailing.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
So now we fast forward to this trip across Mongolia for the longest hole in golf. And I suppose the first question I would like to know is how many golf balls did you go through?
Well, we sat down with the guys at TaylorMade beforehand, and they said, how many balls do you need? And we just said, maybe 5 a day. So about 80 days, 400 golf balls. But 400 golf balls weighs like 15 kilograms, And as the caddy, I've got to tow this thing. So, but anyway, cut a long story short, we actually ended up only using 135 of them. So we over or underestimated our abilities in sort of looking for balls. So I claim credit as a caddy for that.
And in terms of the shots taken, I believe there was a par that you set yourselves of 14,000.
Yeah, so we just over par. We ended up being about 6,100 over par. So I think, we completely...
You won't be invited to the Nedbank Challenge there.
No, not anytime soon.
No, but if Adam's sitting in Hong Kong listening to this now, all credit to him, because honestly, if I'd done it, I would have taken 30, 40,000 shots. So we completely underestimated the golfing challenge aspect of it. And it ended up being, Adam also had quite a heavy backpack on to sort of take some of the weight off me as the caddy and what I had to tow. So he ended up taking a wedge and sort of hitting a 3/4 wedge across Mongolia. So he's hitting a sort of 100 yards, 100 meters every shot, instead of this ambitions of doing 150, 160 yards a shot. So a lot more shorter shots than we imagined.
Okay. Were there some unpredictable kind of obstacles that popped up to...
Okay, I mean, so basically the way it works is we went to there's only one golf course in Mongolia, which is outside the capital city of Ulaanbaatar. And we went to them and said, can we finish on your 18th green? And they said, absolutely. And we said, which is the furthest point in Mongolia from that green? And we worked out it was the most western point at the base camp of the highest peak, which borders Kazakhstan, Russia, and China. And to get up there, I mean, in itself was a 3 or 4 hour ride in a Russian jeep, a camel and horse trip to the top. And then we sort of plotted from that starting point to the green a way that we thought was feasible from a golfing point of view. And for us, the biggest challenge was grass length. Like you didn't want to come over a mountain pass and there's sort of waist-high grass length. So we spent hours and hours and hours on Google Earth, and also with a Mongolian expedition guide who'd done a lot of expeditions around Mongolia. And obviously we were the first people ever to sort of plot a route of that distance, but also based on grass length. And so there was some, so we plotted it pretty well, but there were a lot of mountains we had to sort of go the other side around, and climbing up sort of some of these rocky embankments is some of the hardest stuff I've done in my life.
You have anybody stealing the ball after you've whacked it to 150 meters?
We did have some kids who sort of every now and then would pick up this white rock that had come flying through the air, wondering what it was. Leave that! Yeah. And we got it, and to recognise it as an official.
I don't understand you either.
Yeah, I'll come to that just now. But to recognise it an official world record, we needed a governing body of golf to recognise it as a golf hole. So both the European Tour and the Sunshine Tour gave us their official endorsement that they recognised as a golf hole, which meant that from that tee box to that 18th green, Adam played every single shot just as if you were on a normal golf course. So every time you lost the ball, you'd have to come back to where you played it from, add on an extra shot. The guys at Data built us an app, so every time Adam hit a shot, he would push a button on his phone, or a little Bluetooth button, which would use the GPS location of the phone to record the shot. So we had a sort of way of verifying it, and also to keep the integrity and the purity of the game of golf at the forefront of everything we did.
Because you have to play it where it lies. So what was the weirdest place that the ball was laying?
Well, there was a lot of unplayable lies. But
on the peak of some camel dung must have been.
No, we had. I won't use the word that we talked. We had a lot of dung lies. I'm not surprised.
Continue our conversation with Ron Rutland. 20,093 shots and 2,011 kilometers across Mongolia for the longest hole in golf. A world record. Mangoes. Because you're vegan now from after your Africa trip.
Yeah, I've got to be the fattest vegan around. And I think Mongolia has got to be the most carnivorous society in the world. So if there's a country to go and be a vegan caddy, it's probably not Mongolia.
Well, I mean, because they eat a lot of meats from the animals that they breed, right?
Yeah,
There's not a lot of farmland and pastures and whatnot.
No, it's one of the most inhospitable environments in the world. I mean, the Ulaanbaatar, the capital city, is the coldest capital city in the world. So basically, not much grows there. So most people are just nomadic shepherds, and they've got their various goats and sheep.
What did you eat?
We get
took a lot.
Sorry?
Did you take a lot with
you?
you?
We took a lot with us, and we, dehydrated camping food and that sort of thing. But also, you get to these little villages or settlements, and it's not really. I wouldn't say a shop is a generous word, but there'd always be sort of noodles and rice and beans, and every now and then, if you're lucky, some potatoes and onions, which is probably the the extent of their vegetable regime.
Wow. Yeah. Your diet must have been so exciting for 80-something days.
I mean, Mongolia's got to be the most incredible place, and I recommend it as a visit, for people to go and visit, but I wouldn't go there for the cuisine. Let me put it like that.
After a few days from the start, you apparently gained an extra member. A dog named Yoube.
Yeah,
What's happened to Yoube?
Well, I mean, more than a side story. So after the second or third day, Andrew King, who was actually with us filming, we did it for 3 times. He came out to join us to do some filming, and Adam and I crossed the river and came around the corner, and he had this big black dog next to him. What's going on here? And he says, no, this dog's sort of been whimpering and crying, and we didn't think that much of it. And he sort of carried on that afternoon, started following us, and next day he woke up from our, got out our tents, and he was still there, and 78 days later he got to Ulaanbaatar with us. I mean, I get goosebumps every time I tell the story. This dog, who was elderly, crossed the entire country, barring the first 2 days with us. And he was a big part of the team. He started the cart became his home, and he defended it with his life. And it meant that Adam and I could sort of go wandering off if we got to a little town and go and buy supplies and not worry about the cart at all. And it sort of a lot of, it became obviously a bit of responsibility because, across the desert we had to...
Now you got to feed him.
We've got to feed him, and the water, we had to sort of have about 150 kilograms. The cart was fully loaded with maybe 50 or 60 litres of water. So, but I mean, it wasn't, he just was with us. And we named him Yoube after a few days, which is the acronym for Ulaanbaatar, the capital, because we said at this rate he'll walk all the way there with us, and he did, and he became a bit of a local celebrity. We did a few local media stuff before we left, and we had sort of, particularly as we got closer to the capital city where people had telephones and access to the internet, and people would upload pictures of us to the local Facebook pages of Mongolia, and people would stop, we've seen you on the internet, this must be Yoube. He became a bit of a celeb, and we had a few people in South Africa and Hong Kong offer to sort of adopt him after the trip. But it's a bit unfair. I mean, he's a wild Mongolian nomadic dog, and to sort of take him back to South Africa or Hong Kong, I think would be a bit unfair on him. And at the very, very last day, the day after we finished, and before we wrapped up to pack up, we went to the national park to visit for the day, and we took Yoube with us. And we found an elderly couple there, and their reaction was, what an honor that you would choose to give us your dog. This is like a gift from God, and they lived in the middle of this national park, and so for us it's nice to know that we left him in a better place and we found him.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So 150 kg cart, mostly loaded with water.
Yeah, water. The big fluctuation, the big variable was water and food, depending on how much distance we had between these. They call them sums, which are these little settlements. We could get supplies, but tents and sleeping bags and a few spare parts. The golf balls, as we mentioned, the 6 or 7 golf clubs that we were carrying. So we obviously had the driver, which we only used on the very first shot. The putter, which we carried the whole way across Mongolia, and I said to Adam the whole way, if we get all the way to this 18th green and you actually chip in from off the green, we've carried this putter all the way. But he ended up the little side thing, he actually ended up 2-putting, and he sunk a little slippery 7-footer downhill to sort of break 20,094, which was obviously absolutely no relevance whatsoever, but he finished on a high. But that cart, we carried everything, our last possessions and everything we needed on the trip, and it sort of became, at the end of the trip, I felt I could have carried on in terms of just the laugh and the simplicity of the laugh. And,
wow.
But the one thing I would have left behind was that cart. It was a bit of a...
Well, Adam Rolston, apparently listening in from Hong Kong. I do hope you've enjoyed listening to the recount from Ron Rutland. And, of course, it was also done all in aid of charity. People can still donate, I believe.
Yeah, so it's much more than just 2 guys on an adventure. And I believe there's absolutely adventure for adventure's sake. But Laureus South Africa, an amazing organisation, Sport for Good, which use the power of sport to sort of uplift and various community projects that they support in Hong Kong and Mongolia and Ireland, where Adam is from, and here in South Africa. And they use basically it comes down to they use the power of sport, as well as their sister organisation, the South African Golf Development Board. So what we did is we auctioned off all the sort of 400 balls before we left, and people could own a ball and, dare I say, a little piece of history by owning a section of the journey. And we've raised almost $20,000, which is a fantastic effort. And often you feel like you're out there and you feel that you're alone, and you feel that this unsupported trip. But it's when you sort of get internet and you realize how many people are out there supporting us through various means. It's just it's very, very heartening. And people can still go to thelongesthaul.com, see some of our pictures and our social media stuff, and if they feel inclined to go and contribute to our fundraising efforts. It's just an amazing journey, and fantastic to be able to support an amazing organisation at the same time.
Excellent. Well done to you, Ron, and to Adam Ralston. And I look forward to seeing you again very soon on another adventure.
I look forward to it, Guy. Thank you. Thanks for having me.